Okay, this video is going to introduce you to return values, return statements in Java. And so what happens is we have already learned how to pass data from one method to another through a variable call, through a method call. Now we're going to pass data from one method to another using another tool. And so let's go to the start here. Of course, we start with the main method, and we have num1 and num2 are declared and assigned, and then we have another variable called new num that is declared, but there's no assignment. Now when we go down to line 20, we see that new num is assigned something. And so the key thing here, we need to recognize this as a method call. So I would label this on your notes here as a method call. Alright, so this is a method call right here. And so new num is going to be assigned the value of this method call. And so when you come to line, so when the compiler comes to line 20, it's going to do two things. It's going to assign, and it's going to pass arguments. We already learned how to do this. So what's it going to do first? Well, first it's going to we're going to do the right side of the assignment operator. And so the first thing that's going to happen is this method call is going to pass two arguments to the method header that's being called. So just like before, when the method call was on its own line, even though it's not on its own line, it still does the same thing. It's going to take the compiler to the method header of the method being called. And of course, we're taking calculator, and we're looking for the method header whose name has the name calculator. Now, here's a test question. What does the compiler do when it comes to line 5? When the compiler sees a data type and a variable, then we think of the word declare. So we know that the compiler is going to declare num1 and num2. But even more specifically than that, what does that mean? That means that the compiler is going to reserve in the computer memory a memory location named num1 and another memory location named num2. Now these two variables are going to be able to be used by the calculator method, because the calculator method is in scope to these variables. So remember, we can't call the value of num1 through a variable call. It doesn't work. So we have to pass those values to the method that needs them. And so remember that these are called parameter variables. So the parameter variables are declared. Their memory locations are reserved. And that's the first thing that the compiler does when it sees this line. It reserves these two memory locations. What's the purpose of reserving them? Is so it can catch the 7 and the 3 being passed to them. So it catches them and stores them. And now the 7 and 3, now this method can see the 7 and the 3. It didn't see this 7 and 3. It sees this 7 and 3. And so as we go through this really quick, then we have this sum variables 10, and then we have the difference variable. This value is going to be 4, and then they're going to be called. And so 4 times 10 times 4 is 40, and so the value of product is 40. And so now we come to a new line of code. Now the name of this code line is very simple. Just take a look at the first word. It's called a return statement. Okay, so it's a return statement. Make sure you label that. Now here's the kicker here. Now it's going to return product. Well, what is the value of product? This is a variable call. And so this is a variable call. What is the return value of product? It's 40. Now, So now you read the line and it says return 40. Okay, so we're going to return 40. Now here's the important thing. Right here, this used to say void. And that's for a reason. But the thing to understand is the item, object before the name of the method is called a return value. So right up here, return type. This is the return type. That means that this right here indicates the data type of the return value. This indicates the data type of the return values, the return type. Well, what is being returned? 40. And what is the data type? It's an int. That's why we have an int here. If you put double up here, you're going to get an error message. If you put string up here, you get an error message. Now, a method can return a string and a double, but in this case, it's returning an int. So that's where we get that, is we look right here on the return statement and see what are we returning. Now remember also that when we get done with the method, we said a very important statement, and that is this, when you're done with the method, you return to method call. Return to its method call. That's something you should write down if you don't have it. Is you return, when you're done with a method, you return to its method call. So you're looking for the method call for calculator. What line of code called calculator? And we already know what that is. There's only one method call anyways. So we return this 40 to the method call. And so now you then read this line of code and it says something different. It says new num is assigned 40 because 40 is the value of the calculator method. 40 is the value of the calculator method. And that 40 is going to be assigned to new num. Now this is just a silly setup here. It's a simple program. Now, as you know, with programs that are more useful and are real in the real world, then this type of situation is going to be very important to be able to do. And right now, this is just so that you can see how the compiler operates the order of events as far as its operations with return statements. All right, so now new num becomes 40. And of course, that's going to be stored in there to use later. In this case, it's being printed in another line. All right, so that is return statements. So here's the important thing: there's two ways to return pass data from one method to another. And one is not a variable call. The two ways are the method call and the return statement. Two ways pass data from one method to another.